Hello, guys, this is your friend, and we are back with a new fanic. And if you enjoy this fanic, then please press the like button and subscribe to my channel for more fanic like this. And now let's start the fanic.
I really hope this works. Naruto Uzumaki took a deep breath and exhaled. The battle against Kagaya Otsutsuki had just gone from bad to worse. Sasuke, his best friend, and brother in all but blood, was gone. He knew this to be the case thanks to them sharing the two halves of the sage's chakra. Unfortunately, this also meant the rescue mission to locate and retrieve him was also unsuccessful. It also meant that Sakura and Obito were now lost as well, and the Uchiha was already weakened to begin with. The light-colored, sun-like mark on his right palm was all but useless to him now. Oh, it would still allow him to fight against Kagaya, but never defeat her. It would now serve as a taunting reminder of how close victory once was, and if he couldn't attain victory, then that meant everyone trapped within the infinite Tsukuyomi was doomed. It has to. Kurama chimed in. Do you recall our previous conversation? The Jinchuriki of the nine-tailed fox nodded. How could he forget? Flashback. Naruto was not in a very good mood at the moment, and he had every right to be. Not only had he just separated the Kyuubi from its chakra, giving himself a huge power boost, but he was even able to meet his mother in the process, who if it wasn't for, he may not have won against the fox. Their time together wasn't very long, but he learned all sorts of things from her. Like what happened on the night he was born, his Uzumaki heritage, and how she and his father had met. Meeting his mother, listening to her story, hearing her tell him she loves him, by all accounts, it was one of the happiest moments of his life. Finally, the answers he'd been craving for all his life were his, but none of it mattered anymore. Why? Because he was lied to. While he was training with Killer Bee to get that huge power boost of his under control, while at the same time cataloging all of the animals on the island, he felt someone else use the Kyuubi's chakra. Deciding to investigate, he entered Sage mode, and was shocked to learn that a war was raging on around him. Those who were on the island with him had kept this a secret from him. He didn't even know how long the fighting had been going on for until someone informed him, and that someone just happened to be the fox. 3 days. For 3 days, and 2 nights, his friends, among the many, had been fighting, and dying, all for him, and Killer Bee. Had the fox, now known to him as Kurama, not asked to meet with him right now, he would have left the island long ago to help. It was still odd referring to the fox with his name, but like everything else in his life up to this point and time, he'd adapt. And honestly, the only reason Kurama had even given him his name is because they had come to an understanding. The giant fox explained it to him plainly. He would rather still be sealed inside of him, than be in the hands of an Uchiha, since he knew from experience that only someone with that clan's cursed eyes could collect, and control, the other Biju, seeing as there were no others alive today with the means of doing the same. To show just how serious he was about this, not only had he given him his true name, which Kurama said he's guarded very closely over his life, but he was also going to cooperate with him when it came time to use his chakra. The time when they fought for control of his chakra was in the past, and before he realized just how bad things had become. To Kurama, this was but a small price to pay for what freedom he had so he could remain out of reach of the Uchiha madman. Naruto eyed Kurama. What did you want to talk about? He was hoping this conversation was kept short. His friends were still out there after all. The giant fox remained silent for a few solid seconds, contemplating if what he was about to share with his host was a good idea or not. I may know of a way that will allow us a chance to stop this war from happening. In the end, he decided to proceed forward with it. The blonde exploded, as was expected. What? Why didn't you tell me this sooner? He questioned furiously. You know, before people started dying. Not appreciating the accusatory tone being directed at him, Kurama responded in kind. Silence. He roared. I could have easily just kept this information to myself. The only reason I'm even bothering to share it with you is because we have an understanding. After taking a few seconds to recompose himself, the fox spoke once more. The information I know is meant to be used as a last resort, he added. I know you, Naruto Uzumaki. You would not have hesitated to use the information that I've shared with you the second one of your friends died. Naruto's jaw flexed. He couldn't deny that claim. It just wasn't in his nature to allow someone, let alone someone precious to him, to die if he could have done something, anything, to save them. It seems you've inherited your mother's selective hearing as well. Hey, the fox ignored him. Do you not recall the first thing I just said to you? Though he was still miffed about the jab at his mother, Naruto sat down, and took a thinking pose. His eyes widened all of a sudden, and he looked up at Kurama. You said you had a way to stop this war from happening. How? Kurama grinned widely, showing off his canines. By traveling to the past. He answered, before he turned serious. You must understand, Naruto. Knowledge of this sort is forbidden for a reason. The consequences of this knowledge will not only affect you and I, but everyone. Not to mention the fact that if someone with less than noble intentions gained this knowledge, then things would just go from bad to worse. The blonde nodded. He may not understand a lot of things, but he could understand just how serious Kurama was about this. What would the consequences be? The nine-tailed fox did not answer immediately. The truth is, even he didn't know. Single quote. It can be a wide array of things. The point I'm trying to make here is this: one does not simply tamper with the laws of nature, and expect to remain unscathed. Naruto frowned as Kurama shrugged off his question. Oh, he gave him an answer, yet at the same time he didn't. This was something that would have to be talked about later on. For now, however, he would move on. There were more important at stake. I'm guessing this information of yours is a technique, right? The fox nodded. How do I use it? The same way any other is used, he replied. Naruto nodded, glad it was something he was familiar with, even if he didn't use hand seals all that often. The only thing is, it's going to be the most hand seals you've ever used in your life. Okay. Anything else I need to know? Kurama sighed. His container just didn't seem to understand the gravity of what he was explaining to him. Then again, this was Naruto he was dealing with, so it shouldn't come as a surprise. It's going to take nearly all of our chakra combined to achieve the desired result, he replied. And no matter what, never lose focus. This technique will require every ounce of your concentration. The son of Minato and Kushina nodded. Can I ask you something? Kurama nodded, giving him the go-ahead. How do you even know a technique like this? The fox looked up at the ceiling behind his new seal of the place he called home wistfully. I've lived a very long time, and in that time, I've traveled these lands far and wide, he began. And in those travels, I've come across many things, one of which happened to be this technique. This wasn't entirely true. Yes, he's lived a very long time, and seen many things, but this technique was not one of them. He came across this technique when his father first sent him to live in a temple in the land the humans now called the Land of Fire. It was to separate him from humanity, protecting him from them, and vice versa. It was inside of the temple that he noticed the writing on the wall, and soon came to understand what it meant. I see. So how far back are we looking at here? Hard to say, but with our chakra combined, I'd give us an estimation of say at least a few months. Hearing that answer honestly threw Naruto for a loop for a brief second. That's it. He would have thought with all of the chakra between the two of them it'd be more. Still, a few months was better than nothing. Maybe he'd even get lucky, and have a chance to save Ero Sennin, or anyone else who'd died between then and now. Kurama shrugged. It doesn't matter how much chakra you or I have. Time is an inherent force. It's going to push back against anything attempting to disrupt its natural flow. We'd be lucky to receive more than 2 months. Not one to dwell on things for long, Naruto nodded, and moved on. How long will it take to learn this technique? Years. We don't have that kinda time. The fox nodded. I know. That's why you're receiving the advanced course. He explained. I want you to make as many shadow clones as you can, ordered Kurama. To the point that you feel low on chakra. Crossing his fingers, the blonde did as instructed, creating as many clones as he could muster. How long do you think this is going to take? If we work non-stop, with few breaks in between, then maybe a day and a half at the shortest, he answered, giving an honest estimation. 2 to 3 days at the longest, maybe. Everyone fighting doesn't have that sort of time, said Naruto. We better get to work. Flashback end. Kurama nodded. Good. Remember. Don't lose focus. Naruto took a deep breath, and exhaled. He could do this. Creating as many clones as he could in his new form to distract Kagaya, he began to gather, and focus, his chakra while simultaneously going through the hand seals necessary as quickly as possible. Unfortunately, while the pressure to finish was already high, it had just increased 100-fold. It hadn't even been a minute before bad news was relayed to him. Prior to being destroyed, one of his clones overheard Black Zetsu informing his mother that he was up to something. Damn it, I just need a few more seconds. He was almost done. His eyes widened a fraction when a small tear in the open space in front of him suddenly opened, and from the darkness of another dimension emerged a hand with a bone attached to it. He knew what this was, and what it would do to him if it hit. It felt like an eternity watching as certain death approached him head-on, and even longer still as he watched the last person still alive that he cared about sacrifice themselves for him. Kakashi took the blow meant for him. No time to wonder how the man had gotten there. He grit his teeth, and steeled his emotions, about to do one of the hardest things he's ever had to do in his life. Thank you. He thanked the one-eyed man for stepping in front of him, and saving his life. I promise I'll save you and everyone else. Kakashi gave him an eye smile. I know you will. He turned to Ash. Having just barely managed to hold back the flood of emotions threatening to break, he finished the last seal, and activated the technique. Toki no Aku. Seishu Nenrei. Before anything could happen, however, Kagaya fully emerged before him, and wrapped her hand around his throat. Not wanting to take her back with him, since it would defeat the whole purpose, and make Kakashi's sacrifice in vain, he tried to force her to release him. One hand was trying to crush the wrist around his throat while the other was firmly holding onto one of her horns. Pain suddenly racked his entire body, and he knew that this had to be the technique finally activating. With one final spurt, he used every ounce of strength still left in his tired body, and broke off her horn, causing her to scream in pain, and forcing her to release him just as the technique fully kicked in. His vision began to become blurry before a creeping darkness began to fill in the world around him. The last thing he saw was the face of an enraged Kagaya bearing down on him, reaching for him, then nothing. Wake up, Naruto. The blonde's eyes snapped open at the call of his name, and immediately wished he was unconscious again. His entire body was in an unbelievable amount of pain. It felt like he was being torn apart in different directions. The extraction by Madara earlier didn't hurt this much. How was he still alive? It's probably thanks to being an Uzumaki, and to Kurama. After taking a few seconds to allow the pain to recede a bit, and regain control of his breathing, he finally took notice of the void of darkness surrounding them, and of the fact that Kurama was outside of the seal. I'm guessing by where we are, and how you're outside the seal, the technique worked. The giant fox nodded, agreeing with his Jinchuriki's assessment, and then grunted in pain. What's wrong? I can feel something pulling on my chakra in 2 different directions. So I'm guessing that's your consequence. Kurama nodded with another grunt. Most likely. Naruto suddenly began to spasm as more pain shot throughout his body. The fox could only look on, hoping whatever it was that was happening to his container passed. It did, eventually, and the blonde calmed down, though he now appeared much more haggard. As forcing me to bear unbelievable amounts of pain my consequence, fox. The 9-tailed fox frowned. Possibly. They were traveling to the past after all. Their bodies had to adjust to the time frame they were forcing themselves into. Then again, it could be something else entirely for all he knew. Time travel was tricky like that. What I do know, however, is that you're beginning to forget. Naruto sent his partner a confused glance. Forget? Forget what? Don't worry about it. He'd just be wasting his breath. Arg. Kurama grunted in pain once more as he felt the pull beginning to become much stronger. Seeing as his time was becoming very limited by the second, he decided to get this next part over with. He gently placed his hand atop of Naruto's head. What are you doing? Making an investment. His giant hand briefly glowed for a few seconds before dying down. You'll see the benefit of what I just did for you one day. If Naruto's parents could do this, then so could he, though what he decided to leave behind was different compared to them. Kurama was taking no chances this second time around. They had to win. Not really understanding what he meant, the blonde just went with it. He then watched as the giant fox placed something around his neck. It was a red thread, most likely his fur, and attached to it was a piece of paper. What's this? Inquired Naruto, fiddling with the paper between his fingers. Consider it a gift. Now very curious as to what it said, he opened it. It had his name written on it, but not the one he was accustomed to. Naruto Namikaze. He looked at the fox. Why not Uzumaki? Sure, he was happy to finally know who his dad was, but he didn't want the man's name. He was an Uzumaki at his core. Because depending on how far back we actually travel, some won't hesitate to kill an Uzumaki. He didn't say it, but Kurama knew something was wrong since they hadn't ended up in the past yet, which could only mean they were traveling farther back than originally thought. If he was correct about his theory, then the surname of Namikaze should have no meaning to anyone yet. Then again, no one would exactly mistake him for an Uzumaki either, but he would rather not take that chance since a talented censor could differentiate a person's chakra, and which clan it belonged to if they were given incentive to do so. That did beg the question, however. Just how far back were they going, and how? Yes, he saw Kagaya reach for Naruto, but she didn't make contact, did she? He was inclined to believe no, since he hadn't seen her in this void he and his container shared. His thoughts on the matter were interrupted. Thanks for looking out for me. The giant fox gave him a microscopic nod in return. He would have never done something like this in the past, but things had never gotten this bad before. So, part of it was done out of necessity, and the other is because he's come to like, and respect, his container, which only one other person can ever claim to have accomplished. He noticed the blonde's eyes slowly starting to close shut, and knew it was only a matter of time until he disappeared from this place, and ended up in the past of their new home. I see you finally used the knowledge of the technique I created many, many years ago. Kurama was content to just let himself fade from this plane of existence when his time came, but now it was different. He recognized the voice that had just spoken. Looking to his left, where Naruto was, he spotted his old man. Of course it was you who created it. It made perfect sense, all things considered. Not only did Kagaya and Black Zetsu not know what they were up to, but it was also his father who had sent him to that specific temple all those years ago. Plus, this was the man who held the most intricate knowledge of chakra in the world, so it was not out of the realm of possibility that he could create such a technique, no doubt to use in case his first option failed. He shook his head. None of that mattered anymore. What did matter, however, was the question he had for his old man. Why are you here? While he was happy to see one of the only two people he cared about, present circumstances notwithstanding, the old man wouldn't be here for no reason. Choosing to remain silent, Hagoromo approached the unconscious blonde, and just like Kurama had done seconds ago, he placed his hand atop young Naruto's head. It remained there for a few seconds before a dim hue of chakra came and went. What did you do? The old sage merely smiled. I simply gave Naruto a gift, though it was more from his mother than I, he replied. It will undoubtedly help him in the times to come. Taking a few seconds to process the significance of the information, Kurama stared straight into his old man's eyes. You know where we're heading. This was the only logical answer that came to him, as he could think of no other reason as to why the old sage would deliver on a request from a dead woman in the Pure Land, and no doubt breaking all sorts of rules in the process. Hagoromo did not answer. Fine. Don't answer that, but answer me this. Can Naruto defeat Kagaya with this second chance? The Sage of Six Paths inhaled, and exhaled. Alone he will fail, no matter how powerful he becomes in his new life. Then how? Once more, Hagoromo did not answer. Before Kurama could attempt to question his creator once more, he began losing consciousness, before fading completely, leaving Hagoromo and Naruto alone. The old sage released a sigh. As much as he would have liked to have given Kurama an answer that would have placated him, he couldn't. He knew no other way of defeating his mother aside from what used to be embedded on the palms of Naruto and Sasuke. The time travel technique was only a means to that end. The sealing worked the first time with him, and his brother Hamura, not so much the second. If it was to work the third time around, then the reincarnations of his sons were going to need the assistance of his other children. The young man before him had brought them together once before, and would need to do so again. Just as he did moments ago, he once more placed his hand atop of Naruto's head, and it glowed dimly for all of a second before fading. The first time he did this was on behalf of the Naruto's mother. This time, however, he was adding some insurance of his own that will no doubt help the young man when the time to fight his mother comes again. Though whether he uses that knowledge is up to him, as it will demand he sacrifice much. Hagoromo smiled sadly at the sleeping young man. Though your presence in the past will be unnatural, and you an anomaly, you will also be the catalyst that forces change, giving the future a chance to survive. Naruto disappeared soon after. With his piece said, Hagoromo followed suit, hoping the blonde would be able to defeat his mother this time around. Land of Fire, October 10th. Far away from the dangers of the outside world, and those that dwelled within, there was a lush and vibrant forest, and within it stood a man. He was out hunting, stalking some prey when it suddenly took off in a direction opposite him. His eyes narrowed. Something had spooked it. Focusing, he tried to listen for anything that may have done so, and that's when he heard a faint sound. Enhancing his hearing with chakra, he heard the sound clear as day. There, just off in the distance, less than 100 meters east of him, someone was crying. Which was odd in and of itself. Because aside from himself, and his wife, no one else called this part of the forest home, he'd know if they did thanks to the measures they'd taken. The closest neighbors they had lived many, many miles away from them. Curious as to how a child had penetrated their defenses, he decided to investigate. There wasn't much left in this world that could still surprise him these days, but what laid in front of him certainly came very close. He expected to find a child, which he did, just not an infant boy, and a one at that. How the boy had survived out here so long as he did was a mystery to him. Either way, if he didn't do something, and fast, the infant wasn't going to survive for much longer. Biting his thumb, he swiped a small amount of blood across the hidden seal located underneath his left wrist. Out came a scroll, and from that scroll he removed a warm blanket. Acting quickly, he carefully picked up the boy, and gently wrapped it around him, trying to warm him up as best he could. Though this temporary solution would help for the time being, and increase the boy's chances of survival, it would not help stave off the cold once darkness fell around the forest. It seems I'm done hunting for the day. It was time to head home. Sealing his tools away, along with the scroll, he turned in the direction home was, and began walking in said direction only to nearly trip over something on the ground. Fortunately, he wasn't a shinobi in name only, albeit a retired one, and very quickly regained his footing. Once he made sure the boy was fine, he began searching for the offending object that nearly made him take a spill with infant in arm, and his eyes widened when he spotted said object. It was a horn, but unlike any he's ever seen in these forests before. He looked down at the boy in his arms, then at the horn, and at the boy again. He shook his head. Contemplation would have to wait. He needed to return home. Picking up the horn, he sealed it away, and left soon after. After walking for a few miles, the home he and his loving wife had built for themselves years ago came into view, as the did woman he'd been happily married to for the past 7 years. Seeing her outside didn't come as much of a surprise to him. The infant he'd been traveling with had been spooked by his erratic coughing fits on the way here, and began crying, showing off just how powerful a pair of lungs he had on him. The beautiful blue eyes of his wife had yet to leave him, or the small bundle in his arms. "What do you have there, Akihiko?" It was a rhetorical question. Of course she knew, but regardless of knowing, it still needed to be asked. "You know what it is, Kasumi." His green eyes met her blue. "Why not ask? You really wish to know?" She nodded. "Very well then. How did you come across him?" So began Akihiko's explanation of how he located the infant. She didn't interrupt once, listening to his every word until he was finished. After processing everything she'd been told, she spoke. "And you don't believe this to be a trap?" Akihiko stared at his wife for a few seconds. He could understand where she was coming from, but at the same time, she was allowing her paranoia to influence her. "Even if it is, we'll deal with it when the time comes," he responded. "Besides, you can't tell me he isn't worth the trouble." Wondering just what her husband was on about, the rest of her argument died in her throat as Akihiko unfurled the blanket covering the infant, and she finally got a good look at him. Hair as bright as the sun overhead, eyes as blue as the darkest oceans, and skin so smooth you'd think he was a doll. He was by far the most beautiful thing she'd ever laid her eyes on. Kasumi was unsure of herself when her husband attempted to pass the infant over to her to hold, but the moment he was in her arms, something overcame her, and compelled her to gently start rocking him back and forth in her arms while softly humming him a tune. Off to the side, Akihiko smiled lovingly at his wife. She may be the more rational of the two of them, but there were times when he shined through, like now for instance. Seeing her act like this didn't really surprise him. He always told her how much of a great mother she would be if they ever started a family one day. Was he injured? Her sudden question snapped him out of his thoughts, and he shook his head. "No, I checked him over before arriving," he answered. "I did find something interesting though. 2 things actually. And they are." Akihiko held up a folded piece of paper. "I found this note attached to a red rope that was around his neck." He hesitated a bit before deciding to go through with the idea of mentioning the other item he had found. This was near him as well. Kasumi's eyes widened when she spotted the object in her husband's hand. It was a horn, but unlike any she had ever seen her husband bring home before. A gnawing feeling of dread was beginning to enter the pit of her stomach. "Do you believe it's possible that whatever that horn was attached to is the reason he was alone?" "It's possible, but until I return to the area, I can't say for certain." She nodded. "What does the note say?" "Nothing much. Just a name." "What's the name?" "Naruto Namikaze." Kasumi peered down at the blonde bundle in her arms. It wasn't all that uncommon to see orphans in their world, especially nowadays, but never as young as the blonde. Or more specifically, with a note informing the world of who he was. His sudden appearance couldn't be a coincidence, nothing in their world ever is. This baby came into their lives for a reason, though neither she, nor her husband, could fathom what that reason was at the moment. She quelled the rising suspicion she felt the moment she heard Naruto's surname, because she realized something after looking into his innocent eyes. None of it mattered. Not where he came from, or why he was thrust into their lives all of a sudden. Neither she nor her husband were about to abandon a baby to the same fate that befalls all children of this era. The healing has to begin somewhere, why not here and now? Namikaze. She sounded it out. Though I've never heard of them, it does have a nice ring to it. Akihiko nodded in agreement. That it does, but more than that. I do believe it solves the issue we were having a debate about the other day. I think it'll take more than you and I changing our surname to fool anyone, she said, looking at what laid atop her and Akihiko's head. Then we change our hair color to match his, he countered. No longer will we be known as Uzumaki, but as Namikaze, and as parents to Naruto Namikaze, heir of the clan. Kasumi could see her husband was very serious about this idea. Quote. If we do this, then we'll eventually have to tell him everything. Akihiko nodded. He knew what his wife was getting at. By choosing to walk this path, they were going to willingly create a more difficult, and awkward, situation with Naruto later in the future. Be that as it may, however, it did solve the problem they were currently facing after defecting from their clan after the loss of their family and friends, and their disagreements with the clan elders. I know it's going to be a difficult subject to broach and speak about, but I don't believe it'll change anything between us, he said. If she was the rational part of their duality, then her husband was clearly the optimist. She just stared silently into his eyes for what felt like an eternity before nodding. Very well then. Thus did one become three, beginning the rise of the Namikaze clan. Previously. What's the name? Naruto Namikaze. Kasumi peered down at the blonde bundle in her arms. It wasn't all that uncommon to see orphans in their world, especially nowadays, but never as young as the blonde. Or more specifically, with a note informing the world of who he was. His sudden appearance couldn't be a coincidence, nothing in their world ever is. This baby came into their lives for a reason, though neither she, nor her husband, could fathom what that reason was at the moment. She quelled the rising suspicion she felt the moment she heard Naruto's surname, because she realized something after looking into his innocent eyes. None of it mattered. Not where he came from, or why he was thrust into their lives all of a sudden. Neither she nor her husband were about to abandon a baby to the same fate that befalls all children of this era. The healing has to begin somewhere, why not here and now? Namikaze. She sounded it out. Though I've never heard of them, it does have a nice ring to it. Akihiko nodded in agreement. That it does, but more than that. I do believe it solves the issue we were having a debate about the other day. I think it'll take more than you and I changing our surname to fool anyone, she said, looking at what laid atop her and Akihiko's head. Then we change our hair color to match his, he countered. No longer will we be known as Uzumaki, but as Namikaze, and as parents to Naruto Namikaze, heir of the clan. Kasumi could see her husband was very serious about this idea. Quote. If we do this, then we'll eventually have to tell him everything. Akihiko nodded. He knew what his wife was getting at. By choosing to walk this path, they were going to willingly create a more difficult, and awkward, situation with Naruto later in the future. Be that as it may, however, it did solve the problem they were currently facing after defecting from their clan after the loss of their family and friends, and their disagreements with the clan elders. I know it's going to be a difficult subject to broach and speak about, but I don't believe it'll change anything between us, he said. If she was the rational part of their duality, then her husband was clearly the optimist. She just stared silently into his eyes for what felt like an eternity before nodding. Very well then. Thus did one become three, beginning the rise of the Namikaze clan. Now, 4 years later, Land of Fire, October 17th. Akihiko released a sigh. He was currently holed up in his private study, working on a project he had begun well over 2 years ago now. Time had flown by, and he found the more he reminisced about the past, the more he wished he could go back and just slow it down. I can't believe it's been 4 years already. It felt like it was only yesterday when their little blonde bundle of joy had entered their lives, and now look at him. Just turned 4 years old a week ago, and already advancing in his training. Long gone were the quaint, and quiet, days when Naruto was a mute, because once the boy began speaking, you couldn't get him to shut up. It wasn't as bad as it sounded, however. They did in fact learn something about their boy thanks to his incessant talking. The boy was bright, very bright. Once they recognized this, both he and his wife did everything in their power to cultivate his growth. From having simple conversations with him about different topics as often as possible, to playing games, especially those that challenged him to think, well, as much as a child his age at the time could think anyways. As time went on, and he continued growing into himself, they eventually eased him into a more physical routine. Nothing too strenuous, and anything that was always done under heavy supervision. Aside from that, they had also introduced him to projectile weapons, such as kunai, shuriken, and even senbon. Today was different, however. Today, his wife was going to instruct their son on how to unlock the rest of his chakra. They explained as much of the concept to him as they could in the months leading up to today, and as with any child, Naruto did not understand at first. The more they kept explaining it to him, however, the more he began to grasp the concept, and now here they were. I wonder if they've begun yet. Grip, aim, release. Naruto kept chanting this phrase like a mantra as he threw a few of his kunai at a random practice target, all the while patiently waiting for his mother to arrive so they could begin. Hurry up, mom. Or as patiently as a 4-year-old could be. Kasumi smiled warmly at her son from inside of the house when he began to whine. He was similar to his father in that regard, and as with most times, she eventually caved in. What could she say? They were her boys, and she'd do anything for them. Which was a stark contrast to how she was in the beginning, at least in regards to her son. Granted, she had every right to be mistrustful, especially in the times they lived in, and how she grew up, but the fact she had been mistrustful of an infant, one who had barely opened his eyes, left her feeling ashamed of herself. A shame she hadn't quite gotten rid of yet, but was doing everything in her power to do so for the past few years. Finishing up with the dishes, she decided to make a detour, and check up on her husband before heading outside to teach her son. Reason being because her husband was sick, had been for years now after getting nicked by a poisoned weapon from the land of wind. Fortunately, and thankfully, since it was only a scratch, he lived. Unfortunately, the poison was lethal, even in a minor dosage. So while not an immediate death, it was a slow one. It didn't stop him from doing what he wanted, or needed, to do, not entirely at least, but he had to be very careful not to push himself too hard. Walking towards their bedroom, she gently pushed the door open, took a peek inside, and sighed. Her husband wasn't in bed. Closing the door shut, she began walking towards the back of the house, where Akihiko had built his study. Knock. Knock. There was a moment of silence before she received a response. Come in. Opening the door to the small room, Kasumi did not enter, choosing to remain at the entrance, leveling her husband with a look. You were in here all day yesterday. You should be resting today. Akihiko couldn't hide the grimace on his face when he noticed the look his wife was sending him, but had somehow managed to look apologetic despite it. I know, and I'm sorry, he said. The last thing I want to do is put you in the position you're currently in, but I'm so close to finishing this project, I can feel it. She knew how much this project meant to him, her as well, since it was tied directly to their son, but at the same time, he still needed to rest. Because it wouldn't do him, or anyone for that matter, any good if he were to collapse due to exhaustion. Just please get some rest when you're done, for me, okay? The former Uzumaki man could only nod, how could he not? Sometimes, it just wasn't fair how his wife could turn a situation to her favor with but a few words, while at the same time making him feel like he was betraying her if he didn't follow through. He sighed. Even after being married for years now, he still didn't fully understand his wife. Such was the married life he supposed. I'm going to be right outside. So if you need something, don't hesitate to give me a call. With her piece said, she entered, gave him a kiss on the cheek, and left. A very large grin began to spread over Naruto's face the moment he heard the front door to the house open, and his mother walked out. It was finally time to get started. Sorry I'm late. Are you ready to begin? You bet I am. He nodded excitedly. Can I ask a question first though? She nodded. Of course you can. Your father and I have repeatedly told you this, but never be afraid to ask questions, or question something you don't agree with. Even if it comes from the two of you. Naruto had always wanted to know the answer to this question. Ever since his parents first told him to question things, it had always been on his mind, and now seemed like the perfect time to do so since his mother brought it up. Kasumi paused for a brief second as she pursed her lips in thought before giving her child an answer she felt satisfactory with. Yes and no. I want you to listen to what your father and I say, but at the same time, we also want you to think for yourself, to interpret what we teach you, and form your own thoughts and ideals. Because ours won't always necessarily be yours. She explained. Does that make sense to you? The younger blonde gave her an iffy motion. She merely smiled as she gently rubbed the top of his head. I'm sure you'll understand what I mean. You're older. Now, what's your question? Why do I need to unlock my chakra a second time? While it's true everyone is born with their chakra already unlocked, how else would we be standing here? That's but a mere portion of it, she said. What we're going to do today is unlock the rest of it. Understand? Her son nodded. Good. Now I want you to do as I do, and try and get into a meditative position, like so. Sitting down, Kasumi crossed her legs, and placed one hand atop the other. Once she felt comfortable with her positioning, she shifted her attention to her son, and her eyes widened a bit in surprise. Not only was her son already in a meditative position, but he appeared absolutely natural in it, far more than she did at least. How did you do that? Naruto shrugged. I don't know. Once I saw what you were doing, my body just began moving on its own, and the next thing I know I'm on the ground, he explained. How odd. She thought. Deciding to speak more with him on this revelation later, and consult with her husband, she continued in her instruction. Okay. Now that we're in position, I want you to try and block out everything around you except for my voice as I'm going to guide you as you search deep within yourself. Taking a deep breath, Naruto exhaled. Making an attempt to block out everything except her voice, the younger blonde closed his eyes in concentration, and began searching within himself. Though there was a question lingering at the forefront of his mind. Quote. How will I know when I find it? You'll know. A small frown marred his youthful face. That response was not what he had been expecting, but nonetheless, he was determined to succeed, and continued searching. Unfortunately, no matter how hard he searched, he still couldn't locate the source. It was very frustrating to say the least. Kasumi calmly watched her son work, noting his frustration. While she did say she was going to guide him, it was only a ruse on her part, because as much as she wished to help him, this was something her son needed to do himself. Once he located it, however, then, and only then, would she guide him on how to rein it in. A few minutes had passed by before she released a breath. Don't worry if you can't locate it on your first attempt, she said, piercing his concentration. Not everyone is the same. Some find it immediately, others take a bit more time. Naruto mentally scowled when hearing that. Taking that as a personal challenge, he began to search even deeper within himself. As he continued traveling further down the rabbit hole, he suddenly came upon a warm sensation. It felt really nice. This is it. It was just as his mother said. This was his chakra. He knew it instinctively. He pulled. It didn't budge, and refused to budge even after he pulled harder. His frustration had reached its boiling point, and he knew it was only a matter of time before he could do this no longer. So it was with one final heave that he pulled once more, and felt it finally give way. The longer she watched her son struggle, the more she debated on allowing him to continue on for a few minutes longer, or allow him to rest, so he could try again later. The decision was taken out of her hands when pure raw chakra exploded outward from within her son. She knew what to expect when unlocking a person's chakra, having experienced it many a time when she and her husband still resided on Uzu no Kuni, but what was occurring before her very eyes was something else entirely. Her son's chakra was immense, and suffocating, even compared to a full-grown Uzumaki. Were she any less of a kunoichi, she would have crumbled under its massive weight. Seeing as she didn't have to worry about the huge surge of chakra being felt by anyone outside of their home, as she and her husband had multiple seals deployed, she calmly walked towards her son. She placed her hand atop his head, and spoke. Listen to my voice, Naruto. You need to calm down, and slowly recall all of your chakra. I don't know how. He was beginning to panic. Think of yourself as an empty bottle, she suggested. Just gather everything that's leaking outside of you back inside, and seal it shut. Sometimes it helped to have a visual to work with. A bead of sweat traveled down Naruto's furrowed brow as he began to concentrate harder. The image of an empty bottle soon came to mind, and he slowly began to gather the majority of his chakra until he began doing it subconsciously. Are you okay? Opening his eyes, he found himself peering into his mother's eyes, and nodded. I'm fine, but why did something like that happen? Most children your age don't have reserves of chakra anywhere near that of what you just displayed, so I'd wager that's why, she explained. Sorry about that, he said, looking down at the ground, thinking he had done something wrong. Kasumi wrapped her slender arms around him. Never apologize for the gifts you've been given. You were given such large reserves for a reason. What do you think that reason is? The older woman shook her head, and answered honestly. I don't know, but whatever the reason, I know you'll be able to handle it. She pressed her forehead against his, and remained as such for a few seconds. The two eventually separated. Feeling better, he nodded, especially since he had just finished recalling all of his chakra. Good. Because I have something for you. Naruto's eyes lit up, and like all children his age, his previous emotional state was now but a thing of the past. What is it? She handed him a scroll. Use the exercise in there to help control your chakra. Only when you master this technique, and show me firsthand, will I give you the next exercise. The Namikaze heir nodded his head enthusiastically. I'll learn this one, the next one, and any other you have. Kasumi nodded, wholeheartedly believing her son would do as he proclaimed. Having said her piece, she left her son's side, so he could begin his exercise, and quickly made her way back into the house. She went straight to Akihiko's study, and breathed a sigh of relief when she noticed he was fine. Are you okay? He grunted. Yeah, I am. I was just caught off guard by how large his chakra is. So was I, but this just confirmed the conclusion we reached about him. Akihiko nodded, sharing his wife's sentiments. Yeah, that kid is going to change the world one day. They already knew their son was special, but what occurred today went beyond simply being gifted. Today only further cemented their opinion of just how important Naruto was going to be in the future. 3 years later, Land of Fire, April 10th. Just a bit farther now. The soon-to-be 7-year-old blonde was jogging through his family's section of forest at a sedate pace, on his way to gather some food. Though this was the case, his family wasn't exactly hurting for it, far from it actually. His father, though sick, still provided. This was more of him going out and gaining experience. It had been decided one day 2 years ago by his parents that it would be best if he knew how to hunt, and cook, for himself in the event something occurred in the future. The lesson started off simple enough, simply watching his mother and father use the skills they had acquired, and mastered, throughout their lives. Once they felt he had grasped enough of what he was to learn did they begin teaching him in earnest. As time went on, and after a number of supervised trial runs of everything he's learned from his mother and father, was he allowed to hunt and cook small game alone. Though he only did so 3 days out of the week. The rest of his time was spent training. Now, normally, he would keep to routine today, and be on his way to check on the traps his father had set up years ago, but he wanted to try something different today. He wanted to fish. He was currently on his way to a river, though he had no fishing pole whatsoever to speak of, which was okay, because he had a foolproof plan. It involved throwing a large rock on top of another large rock that was in the water, and watching as all the fish floated to the surface. He'd seen his father do this years ago when he was training him at a pond near their home. The river itself was about an hour, give or take, away from home, in a clearing more than 50 yards outside of the boundary created by his parents. He caught sight of it one day when he was out hunting by his lonesome, and had veered much too close to said boundary line. He hesitated in crossing the line that day to investigate. Once he felt more comfortable with the idea, and spent numerous days checking, double checking, and even triple checking the surrounding area to the best of his abilities, did he finally take a step forward. He knew he was breaking an important rule here, going outside the boundary line, but what his parents didn't know wouldn't hurt them. Besides, even if they did manage to learn the truth, he's positive they'd overlook the fact he broke a rule when he shows them the river, and just how much it could provide for the family. He hoped he was right, or else he was in for it. Made it. Arriving at his destination, he peered into the clear glistening water being hit by the sun overhead, and saw all of the swimming fish down beneath, ready to be caught, though they did not keep his attention for very long, however. There, underneath the surface, something was shining through. He didn't know what it was, but he was going to find out. Removing his clothing, so only his underwear remained, he slowly entered the cold water, before diving in head first. Ignoring that sudden chill as he dove straight in, he swam to the bottom, and scooped up a handful of dirt. Rising to the surface, he used the current to wash some of it away, and what it revealed was a rock, but unlike any he had ever seen before. It was a beautiful sparkling shade of green, and it was smaller than his fist. Simply mesmerized by its beauty and exotic nature, he forgot all about catching fish, and decided to return home. Land of Fire, April 17th. Here we go again. Naruto was once more out on the prowl, and was once more returning to the river. He had unfinished business there after last week. Thankfully, neither parent had chosen to press him on his choice of hunting location last week, as they knew not all hunts would yield results. They did, however, question him on why he had chosen not to check on the traps before returning. Instead of giving them an explanation, he showed them. He received a stern lecture, and scolding, soon after. He absolutely hated lying to his parents, but they couldn't find out what he was doing, not until he could prove how valuable the location was, which is why he was returning, this time with fishing pole in hand. His father had given him his old one after he mentioned he may try to fish after he went by some of their hunting grounds. He arrived. Hopefully second time's a charm. And hopefully nothing would distract him this time around from accomplishing his goal. Emerging from his side of the forest, and onto his side of the riverbank, he came to a sudden halt, his eyes wide in shock. It seems he may have been hoping for a bit too much, because standing opposite him on the other side of the river were two people, both girls, one young with dark black hair, the other one older, with red hair. He had never come across, let alone seen for that matter, other people. While he was certainly curious about the two, he was also wary of them. His parents had given him the cold hard truth one day, of how the world outside of their home, and forest, really was. It wasn't a pleasant conversation by any stretch of the imagination, but it was one he needed to hear all the same. His parents told him that if he were to ever meet anyone, rare as it was in their forest, and that person was an adult, then he was to run and hide, and if at all possible, try and alert them. If running was out of the question, then his next course of action was to appear as harmless as possible, and hope that whomever he was facing did not see him as a threat. If neither option was available to him, then he was to fight. His father and mother may not have taught him much in terms of combat, yet, but they did teach him how to survive, and that's what he would have to use against his enemy. They never mentioned how he was to deal with other kids, or a teen in this case, so he would just treat them the same as an adult. Unfortunately, putting what his parents taught into practice was a skill he has yet to master. The girl with red hair took a step forward, and now stood in front of the other girl protectively, kunai in hand, and a glare aimed directly at him. If he wasn't rooted in place yet, he certainly was now. He was no stranger to the projectile weapon, but never had he had one been getting ready to be thrown at him with the intent to harm, or kill. While her weapon kept him in place, it was her glare however that truly unnerved him. "Who are you, and what are you doing here?" questioned the redhead, her voice cold. Somehow managing to push past his fear, he bit the inside of his lower lip hard enough to draw blood, and slowly felt some of the tension he was feeling dissipate. He would need to thank his father for teaching him this trick, though it was only meant to be used when dealing with predators, few that lived in these forests, that triggered a human survival instinct. The redhead in front of him was a predator through and through. Noticing a slight turn in her wrist, he knew she was getting ready to throw her kunai. He needed to do something quickly, or she'd take his continued silence the wrong way. Seeing as running was no longer an option at this point and time, lest he want a kunai in his back, option 2 was his only choice. The fact she hadn't killed him yet, or outright for that matter, boded well for him. Before he could quickly raise his hands in the air, he stopped himself. Sudden movement like that would no doubt be bad. He calmly raised them instead. "Don't hurt me," he said, his voice carrying to the other side. "My name is Naruto, and I'm just here to catch some food." He waved his fishing pole in hand to accentuate his point. The redhead just stared at him, studying him, trying to discern if he was lying or not, before eventually placing her weapon away. Naruto released a small breath of relief. She had bought his act. Unfortunately, he didn't have time to celebrate his small victory. "I'm going to be watching you, so do yourself a favor, and don't do anything stupid." His brows rose a bit. "She's letting me stay." Well, he certainly wasn't expecting that. He'd been hoping that if she didn't see him as a threat, she'd let him leave. "What's the matter?" "Start fishing." The blonde opened his mouth to say something, anything, but shut it. Looking directly into her eyes, he realized what she was doing. She was testing him. If he left now, without doing exactly what he said he was here to do, he would only be confirming whatever suspicions she had about him, and be forced to act. Seeing as he didn't want her to do that, he did as he was told. Sitting down on his side of the riverbank, he cast his line into the water. An awkward silence immediately set in, and as difficult as it was for him to keep his eyes on his line, he just couldn't, and kept on sneaking a few glances at the two across from him. The redhead was currently teaching the younger girl something. After a few minutes of silence, and whatever it was they were practicing, the younger girl lost her cool, and snapped. "Arg!" She kicked a few stones into the water, no doubt scaring the fish, and prolonging his stay. She kept on losing concentration due to her hair getting in the way. Unfortunately, she also happened to catch him staring. "What are you looking at?" Naruto's head snapped back down to his line. "Nothing," he mumbled, shaking his head. After a few more terse seconds of silence, he risked another look at the younger girl again, however this time, he locked eyes with the redhead. He quickly looked down. "If you have something to say, then say it," she told him. "Because you're distracting my friend." The blonde's jaw tightened a bit, not sure if he should respond or remain silent. "Well, if the two of you would like, I may have an answer to her problem." The older one just looked at him while the younger girl stopped fiddling with her hair, leaving one eye visible, to also look at him. "What is it?" Relief flooded his body as he released the breath he'd been holding. He locked eyes with the redhead once more. "I'm going to reach into my pack, so please don't throw that knife at me." The older girl rolled her eyes. She wasn't going to attack him unprovoked. She wasn't trying to be like the rest of the world. That being said, she wasn't going to lower her guard around the boy either. While she may not be able to sense chakra like other people, she was very observant, and noticed the boy not only had calluses on his hands, but he had very sharp eyes for someone his age, with a wit to match if their earlier introduction was anything to go by. He was subtle in not giving anything away, but the eyes are the window to the soul for a reason. She could see the internal conversation he'd been having with himself on how to act and proceed when he first noticed them across the river. He reminded her of the boy she was to be betrothed to, albeit a bit more mature. She noticed he was done searching, and her trained eyes spotted a small object in his hand, shining as the sun hit it. Her eyes narrowed. What is that? It's too small to be a kunai, and much too big to be a shuriken, unless it's a new design. A Senbon needle perhaps. She watched as the blonde tossed the item over to them, and watched as it landed at their feet. Picking it up, she began to inspect it. It was a Senbon needle. After a few seconds, her eyes sought out the boy's once more. Where did you get this? He shrugged. I actually found it in the forest one day, and wanted to use it to hunt, mostly to skin any prey that I caught, he explained. The redhead nodded slowly, finding his explanation solid, since it was very likely all sorts of projectile weapons were littered throughout this forest due to all the fighting, be it from the past or present. There were just a few things that didn't quite add up. I find it hard to believe you can skin anything with this sort of weapon, she pointed out. And why does this so-called weapon of yours have a beautiful green rock on top of it, and how did you get it so smooth? Naruto nearly had a heart attack when he heard her calling him out on his lie. He was happy she had bought the idea of him having found it out here, when in reality it was one of his own, but now he had to come up with something to satisfy her other questions, and the lie he had been called out on. Quote. It's for precise skinning. One look back at her said she didn't buy that excuse. He sighed. Okay. It's not a weapon, but a tool for catching fish. The reason it has the green rock on top is to attract fish to it, but also because it makes it look nicer, since it's a gift. As for how it's so smooth, well, I'm sure it was underwater for a very long time, he answered. The redhead nodded slowly once more. Who is it a gift for? My father. At the mention of his father, the older teen pounced. And what exactly does your father do? Naruto replied without delay. He's a hunter, but he's sick. That's why I'm out here, to help him, he explained. No point in telling them how exactly the man got sick. The gift is meant to cheer him up. You see, he can't do a whole lot anymore, but fishing is one of the few things he still can do. The redhead searched his eyes, looking for any form of deceit. His answer, while to the point, was also short, and while she believed what he said, she couldn't quite get rid of this nagging feeling in the back of her head in regards to it. She nodded to herself. More questioning was needed. I see. You father must be quite the teacher if he can train a what, 5-year-old? 6 actually. Quote. A 6-year-old to hunt, and survive, on his own. While Naruto wanted to acknowledge his mother, since it was disrespectful not to acknowledge her efforts in his training, or the skills she gained, and mastered, over the years, he kept his mouth shut. It was best if the redhead in front of him believed it was only he and his father out here. He returned to the topic at hand, and replied. My father drilled it into me that a person must know how to do many things in order to survival in our world, no matter the age. Your father is a smart, and wise, man. For the first time since meeting each other, Naruto wore a smile. It was nice hearing others say what he already knew. He is. He said. Anyways, you can use that lure as a hairpin for her. He looked at the younger girl. Never been used by the way, just in case you were wondering. The redhead stared at the hairpin, and then at her younger friend, who shrugged. I'll follow your lead, said the younger girl. The older teen nodded, and turned to face the blonde. What about your father? Naruto shrugged. I'll just get him something else. Besides, If it helped him get out of the situation, then he's positive his father won't mind. I see. Thank you then. You're welcome. He watched as the older girl attempted to fix the younger one's hair. She couldn't quite get all of the hair up with the pin, only half, which left one side of the younger girl's face exposed. Before the redhead could attempt to adjust it, he decided to chime in. I like that look, he said, staring at the younger girl. It suits you. Oh, thank you, muttered the younger girl bashfully at the compliment. The redhead smiled at her friend, and then looked at the blonde. Naruto's eyes widened when the redhead looked at him. I like your hair too, he added very quickly. It's beautiful. Red is one of my favorite colors. The older girl wore an amused smile on her face. Thank you for the compliment. Rare as it was, since no one aside from her father ever complimented her hair. It felt nice. Looking up at the sky, she noted the sun was now a bit behind them. It's about time we head back, she told her young friend. The blonde frowned. Why are you leaving so early? He was starting to enjoy their company, even if they were still complete strangers. Dusk won't settle in for 2 more hours. We've actually been practicing since early in the morning, replied the redhead. If we don't return soon, then our families will come looking for us, and as someone who helped us, I don't want any harm to befall you, or your family. Naruto wasn't sure just how it was that he had helped her, but nonetheless, he was grateful for her thoughtfulness, though there was something he wanted to know before they left. Before you leave, can I know the names of my 2 new friends? Friends, thought the redhead. She was pretty positive a small afternoon together didn't qualify them as friends. Turning around to address the blonde, she stared straight ahead into his blue eyes, and couldn't help herself, she smiled. The boy in front of her was bouncing around on the balls of his feet. He was just so innocent, despite the current situation. It was endearing in a way. It also went to show just how little contact he's had with others his age if he considers them 2 strangers, albeit near his age, friends. The redhead remained silent for a few seconds before speaking. Quote. My name is Mito. She saw no harm in telling him. After all, they'd probably never meet again after today. And my name is Toka. The younger girl followed suit, trusting the judgment of her friend. The 2 females shared one last nod with him before departing to their side of the forest. Naruto could not stop the megawatt grin from tugging on his lips. He had just made friends. And 2 of them. Sure, things had started off rough, but it all turned out okay in the end. And to think he thought today was just going to be another day, oh how wrong he was. 10 months later. Land of Fire, February 13th. Naruto was currently standing in the clearing outside of his home, and staring direction into the eyes of his father. The man mentioned teaching him something today. I wonder if he's going to add on to what mom has already taught me. Before his old man joined him outside, he'd been busy practicing his calligraphy, all in the hopes of one day mastering the art known as fuinjutsu. When his mother first introduced him to the art of seals months ago, his eyes lit up. There were just so many possibilities that could be accomplished with this skill. From what he could understand, the only thing a practitioner really needed to have was imagination. His mother told him much more went into it than that, but in essence, he was correct. The world of reality has its limits, the world of imagination is boundless. He quoted his mother. Either way, it made sense his father was out here if he was indeed going to teach him about seals. It was a form of training that didn't require either party to exert much, if any, physical effort, and that was important due to the fact that his father had collapsed last year. His old man had been out hunting small game, but had not returned home at his usual time. Darkness descended upon the forest quickly that day. With their anxiety becoming nearly palpable, he and his mother eventually decided to take matters into their own hands, and ventured into the forest in search of their husband and father. They located him 1.5 miles away from home. His sickness had finally gotten to him. Naruto was still haunted by the feelings and memory of utter helplessness he felt that day, not sure if he'd ever see his father open his eyes again. Thankfully, the man pulled through, but what remained of his days of hunting, or any sort of physically demanding labor, were over. It was now his full-time job to hunt, and provide for the family. It was a great deal of responsibility, but he welcomed it with open arms. What really took time for him to adjust to was finding a balance between hunting and training. After some trial and error, he managed to find a routine that suited him. I'm sorry. Naruto's brows shot up in surprise as he lost concentration on his current thoughts. Whatever it was he expected to come out of his old man's mouth, that was not it. The older man now had his full attention. For the longest time, I've wanted to stand out here with you and your mother more often, he said. I wanted to be a part of helping you grow, and become a man. Instead, I've had to watch you grown from a distance. Again, I'm so. The Namikaze heir did not allow his father to finish that sentence, and wrapped his arms around the man's waist tightly. His father didn't need to explain himself. He knew how busy the man was with providing, and protecting, their family. It's okay. Any time I can spend together with you is more than enough. Akihiko smiled at his son, pulling him closer. Thanks, son. I really needed to hear that. The two of them remained like that for a few more seconds before separating. Quote. I may not be able to help you all that much physically, but I can still teach you the theory behind what I do know. Are you going to teach me more fuinjutsu? The older man shook his head. No, your mother has that subject covered. What I plan on teaching you is genjutsu, and taijutsu, he revealed. Noticing the confused expression on his son's face, he decided to elaborate. Despite my own massive reserves of chakra, I'm actually very good with illusions. It also helped that it required no physical effort on his part. And the taijutsu, I'm going to instruct on you on the basics, and point out any mistakes you make. Once you have the basics down, will you be ready to start creating your own style, which both your mother and I will help you cultivate and polish. Naruto merely nodded, choosing not to say anything in regards to his father saying he would have to create his own style. He actually already knew a form of taijutsu, though for the life of him he didn't know how. It just came to him one day while he was out training alone, and before he knew it, he was practicing the katas. One thing he did know, however, the style itself was very strong. Quote. Hey, Naruto, would you like to increase your training regimen? I'm always up for pushing myself harder, but how? Before I show you, answer me this. What is the most dangerous tool a human has at their disposal in our world? Naruto thought on this for a few seconds before the answer came to him. Our mind. Akihiko opened his mouth, then shut it. You're correct. The most dangerous tool a human can have in our world is indeed their mind, which is why we have to keep it sharp, but in this instance, however, I was actually looking for another answer, he said. You see, speed is actually the most dangerous tool a human can possess in our world. The span of a few seconds can mean the difference between life and death. The first Namikaze nodded. I want you to remove your shirt, and roll up your pant legs, for a moment. The Uzumaki turned Namikaze man unsealed his ink and brush, and began to draw intricate seals on his son's upper body, and legs. Now, I may not be as skilled with fuinjutsu as your mother, but I'm no slouch either. Okay, but what exactly are you applying? Inquired Naruto. Weights. Responded Akihiko. Real weights can hurt your developing body, and stunt your growth if we're not careful. With these, however, you can adjust the weight as you see fit. When Naruto heard that, he was now more than happy to receive these. They would undoubtedly help him with his taijutsu training. Though unbeknownst to him, Akihiko was also applying another seal right smack dab in the center of his chest, where many theorized the core of the chakra pathway system lay. Finally, after many years of hard work and sacrifice, his special project was complete. Though he may have told a white lie in regards to his skill with seals when it came to his wife. It's true she was better overall, but she, and even their old clan leader, Ashina, would be hard-pressed to create the specific seal he made. Not because it wasn't known, but because it was tailor-made for him and his own. The seal would all but ensure that his son lived a long life. It would transfer all of his chakra over to Naruto, and convert it so his son could use it as his own. Are you almost done? Asked Naruto. He was very eager to try these weights out. Naruto, what have your mother and I always told you? The natural blonde sighed. That patience is a virtue. Akihiko nodded. That's right, and yes, I'm done. Just give me a second to finish up. He went through a few hand seals. Fuin. Once the seal was activated, Akihiko immediately felt the pull on his own chakra core. He hid the strain on his face well, and managed to direct a small smile at his son. How do you feel? The weights are currently set to 1. The younger blonde moved around a bit, testing his arms and legs. Heavier, but other than that, I feel fine. Good. Now, seeing as we're done with that, it's time to start training. Land of Fire, February 14th. A frown marred Naruto's young face. He was currently standing atop a tree branch overlooking the river from a small distance away. While he was here to catch some fish, another part of him was also hoping to see Mito and Toka once more. He hasn't seen them once since their first meeting, but at the same time, he didn't always go to the river either, so it's entirely possible they could have just missed each other. Anyways, he was hoping today would be different in that regard, and it was, to a varying degree. There were 2 people on the opposite side of the river facing his direction, but they were not girls. They were boys, and they appeared to be around his age, maybe a few years older. And unlike Toka, he could easily see that these 2 were trained. It was all in their wrist movements as they tossed stones across the river. Constantly training with kunai, shuriken, and senbon did that, he should know. A low hum escaped his lips. I wonder how the 2 of them would stack up against Mito. He shook his head. He was distracting himself with questions he didn't need to have the answers to. He decided to continue watching them for a bit longer before ultimately deciding what to do. After studying the 2 for a solid couple of minutes, and making note that neither had tried to kill the other yet, he decided it was safe enough to reveal himself. Worst case scenario, he'd escape using one of the techniques his mother had taught him. Taking the long way around, he approached the duo from the same side they were on, so as to not give them any ideas of where he may have come from. He picked up a small stone, and flung it across to the side he was previously on. The sudden movement made the 2 boys snap their heads in his direction. He waved at the 2. Neither boy reciprocated, and it was quickly becoming more awkward the longer it remained silent. Thankfully, the one with the bowl haircut spoke up. Oi, oi, oi. It seems like you know how to toss stones as well. That makes you a rival as well. Naruto slowly released the breath he'd been holding since first deciding to approach the 2. He took a gamble, and so far, it looks like it was paying off. Still, he was surprised how quickly one of them seemed to accept him. He couldn't lie though, it felt nice. That being said, he would still need to be careful around them, especially the boy sending both him, and the boy with the bowl haircut, wary glances. It was the exact same look Mito had been giving him months ago, though this one felt much less dangerous in comparison. So, what were the 2 of you doing before I arrived? He asked. If he could change Mito's mind about him, then it should be possible to do the same again. The boy closest to the river, the wary one, finally spoke. Very little. He replied, his eyes still trained on the 2 like a hawk. I was here by myself, skipping stones, when this one arrived. His eyes traveled to the boy with the bowl haircut. I asked him who he was. He ignored my question, and then began giving me tips on hoes to toss stones. He said, finishing his explanation before looking at the boy with the weird haircut again. So I ask again, who are you? He then looked to the blonde. And who are you? The boy with the bowl haircut decided to answer first. You two can call me Hashirama. Probably best if I don't give out my surname though. The now named Hashirama, and the boy closest to the water, were both looking at him, waiting to see if he would answer. Just as he was about to open his mouth to do so, the blonde closed it. He remained silent for a few seconds before speaking again. Quote. How about a wager? If you can get your stone across to the other side, then I'll give you my name. If you can't, however, then you have to do something for me, said Naruto, having no clue where this crazy idea came from. It wasn't exactly the same way he won over Mito and Toka, but if it got him the desired results, who was he to complain? The boy closest to the river narrowed his eyes and peered down at the stone in his hand. It suddenly felt much heavier than before. He looked at the blonde again. Don't worry, I won't ask for something unreasonable if you can't get it across. Just a simple request. Weighing his options, he decided to take the wager. If he won, then he would gain the name of a youth who had been able to sneak up on him. If he lost, he could always just not come back here. Nodding, he threw his stone. It didn't make it across, and it quickly grew silent. Before the blonde could ask the unnamed boy what he wanted, said boy turned on them, and exploded. You assholes, yelled the unnamed boy, you both stood behind me on purpose, didn't you? You're obviously trying to distract me. He pointed at the blonde and Hashirama. I can't even take a leak if someone is standing near me. That's just how aware of my surroundings I am. Naruto was honestly caught off guard by the sudden rant, and turned to Hashirama, about to ask him if the guy across from them was being serious, but stopped when he saw said boy. He was in the fetal position. Forgive me, mumbled Hashirama, looking depressed. Quote. No need to get all emotional, said the unnamed boy. I tend to make excuses when things don't go my way, he explained. Hashirama did a complete 180, and was up in his old self the moment he heard this. No need to explain. Your ego is just so big that you have a god complex. I can't tell if you're just sensitive, or if you're just being a smart ass, commented the boy closest to the water. He then looked at the blonde. And since you haven't said anything, you're probably making fun of me. Leave, the both of you. I want to be alone. Not before you honor our deal. The unknown boy released a sigh. What do you want from me? I want you to be my friend. The request caught the other two boys off guard. Hashirama smiled at the blonde. Can I be friends with you as well? He asked. The blonde nodded his head vigorously, and extended his hand. I'm Naruto. The two newest friends looked down at the other boy, who sighed. The request wasn't unreasonable. It also helped he actually liked the blonde. Well, at least more than Hashirama anyways, which wasn't all that hard to accomplish. He looked at the two. I'm Madara. Before any more could be said between the three new friends, all of them spotted something floating in the water. It was a body. What in the world? Hashirama ran across the surface of the water to inspect it. Madara narrowed his eyes, suddenly much more alert than before. You're a shinobi. He then looked at Naruto. And you're one as well, aren't you? The blonde chose not to answer, and just remained silent. So the war has finally reached these lands, thought Hashirama. Quote. It'd be best if the both of you head on home, he said, his search yielding him no information, aside from what he initially saw upon the body. I should be leaving as well, he muttered. Later, Naruto, Madara. Hashirama disappeared into the forests. Naruto nodded at him, and then looked at Madara. See ya later, Madara. He left the same way he entered. Quote. Yeah, see you later, mumbled Madara. He wasn't so sure about this whole friendship thing anymore, especially now that he knew both of his friends were shinobi. Still, they hadn't attacked him, or each other, so he'd give them the benefit of the doubt. He left soon after as well. Home sweet home. The blonde's home came into view just as the sun in the sky lowered beneath the horizon, giving rise to its counterpart. On average, it shouldn't have taken him anywhere near as long as it did to return, but seeing as he was making sure he wasn't followed, his hands were tied on the matter. Also, he went to check on the traps afterwards. Normally, it would have taken him an entire day to check on all of them, and it shouldn't have been at all possible today seeing as he split his time at the river with Hashirama and Madara, but he was able to. It was all thanks to a technique he knew that allowed him to do so. He didn't know how he knew it, as it came to him one day, much like his taijutsu katas, but he was glad it did. It was called the Kage Bunshin. It was a different type of cloning technique from the one his mother had taught him. For one, the clones were solid, but could still be dispelled if they were hit with enough force. Secondly, and much more importantly in his opinion, whatever these clones learned, so did he. The technique didn't come without its risks though, as he quickly learned. One massive headache later, and he knew to take it easy with how many he created, and dispelled, at a time. This rule went hand in hand with his training, because despite loving that he could be in so many places at once, learning all sorts of things in a matter of time, nothing beat doing something yourself. The gratification was well worth it. He entered through the front door. "I'm home. Welcome home," Kasumi greeted him. She was in the kitchen preparing dinner. "So, how did it go out there today?" Naruto shrugged. "About the same," he responded. "I brought home 2 days' worth of food though." She nodded, glad to hear that, and made a mental note to place the meat on ice. "Did anything exciting happen while you were out?" "Not really," the lone female hummed. She didn't speak for a few seconds, and the smaller blonde began to sweat a bit. "Okay then. Go ahead and bathe. Dinner should be ready by the time you get out." Doing as told, Naruto breathed a sigh of relief as soon as he turned the corner. That was way to close a call. He was positive she didn't suspect anything, but he could never be sure with his mother. She just had this knack for knowing when he was hiding something. Speaking on that, he didn't enjoy lying to his mother. Yes, he'd been keeping the fact that he knew techniques neither she nor his father had taught him a secret, same with going past the boundaries they set up, but lying about his friends just felt different compared to the other things, and he didn't know why. Maybe it was because it involved others, not just him, and his family, anymore. Either way, he could only hope his new friendships with Madara and Hashirama would be worth it in the end.